Sarah Thompson pulled up to a light private aviation's terminal in her sleek Tesla Model X, the early morning sun glinting off its metallic surface. At 42 years old, she had finally reached a level of success that even her younger self couldn't have imagined. Her tech company, Data Smart Solutions, had grown from a small startup in her garage to a $500 million enterprise that was revolutionizing data security for businesses worldwide. The digital clock on her dashboard showed 7:15 a.m. Sarah had deliberately arrived an hour early for her 8:30 a.m. flight to San Francisco, where she was scheduled to meet with potential investors. After years of flying commercial, even in first class, she had finally decided to invest in a private jet membership. The $250,000 annual fee had seemed steep at first, but the time saved and flexibility it offered made it worth every penny for her busy schedule. Sarah checked her appearance in the rearview mirror, adjusting her crisp navy blazer and making sure her natural hair was perfectly styled. Despite her success, she still felt the pressure to look impeccable at all times. Being one of the few black women CEOs in the tech industry meant she was often under extra scrutiny. As she stepped out of her car, a young valet rushed forward. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome to Alight Private Aviation." He took her keys with a professional smile, quickly placing a claim ticket in her hand. Sarah gathered her designer briefcase and small overnight bag, both gifts she had bought herself after closing her first major contract. The morning air was crisp, and Sarah's heels clicked confidently on the polished concrete as she walked toward the terminal's entrance. The building itself was impressive, all glass and steel, designed to showcase luxury and exclusivity. Through the transparent walls, she could see other travelers in business attire moving about the spacious lounge. Just as she reached for the door, a stern voice called out, "Excuse me, stop right there." Sarah turned to see a security guard, his name tag reading James Miller, quickly approaching her. His hand was raised in a stopping motion, and his face wore an expression that Sarah had seen too many times before in her life. "This is a private terminal," Miller announced, positioning himself between Sarah and the entrance. "You need to have proper authorization to enter this facility." His tone was unnecessarily loud, drawing attention from people both inside and outside the building. Sarah maintained her composure, remembering the words her mother had always told her, "Your dignity is your armor." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out her phone, opening the Elite Aviation membership app that displayed her digital credentials. "I'm a platinum member," she explained calmly, holding up her phone. "Here's my membership ID and today's flight details." Miller barely glanced at the screen. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the entrance. This is a very exclusive facility, and I can't just let anyone walk in claiming to be a member." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling her heart rate increase slightly. She had dealt with similar situations before, but it never got easier. "Sir, I understand you're doing your job, but I am a legitimate member. You can verify my credentials through your system. My name is Sarah Thompson, CEO of Data Smart Solutions." "Listen," Miller said, his voice getting firmer. "I've worked here long enough to know our typical clients. If you don't leave immediately, I'll have to call the police for trespassing." Inside the terminal, several passengers had stopped to watch the scene unfold. A few were taking out their phones, recording the interaction. Sarah noticed one woman shaking her head in disapproval, not at her, but at the guard's behavior. Sarah straightened her spine and pulled out her business card along with her driver's license. "Mr. Miller, I'm going to give you one more opportunity to check my credentials properly. I'm already running authentication on your company's app, and I have additional identification ready. I suggest you take a moment to verify my membership before this situation escalates unnecessarily." The guard crossed his arms, his badge glinting in the morning sun. "Ma'am, I don't care what kind of app or card you're showing me. This is a private facility, and I'm telling you that you don't belong here. Now, are you going to leave on your own, or do I need to call for backup?" Little did James Miller know that his next actions would not only change the course of his career, but would also spark a nationwide conversation about racial bias in luxury services. The events that would unfold in the next few minutes would prove to be a turning point for both Sarah Thompson and Elite Private Aviation. The situation at the terminal entrance was growing tense. As James Miller reached for his radio to call for backup, Sarah Thompson did something unexpected. She smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile or an angry one. It was the same confident smile she had worn in countless boardrooms when someone had underestimated her. Actually, she said calmly, pressing a few buttons on her phone, I'm already on a call with the regional director, Mr. David Chen. He's been listening to this entire conversation. Miller's face twitched slightly, but he maintained his aggressive stance. I don't care who you're talking to. This is my post, and I make the decisions here. Inside the terminal, more people had gathered to watch. Among them was Michael Roberts, a regular client who had shared several flights with Sarah during tech industry conventions. He quickly walked toward the door, his face showing concern. Just then, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the terminal. David Chen, the regional director of Elite Private Aviation, practically jumped out of the car. He was a well-dressed man in his 50s who had built his reputation on excellent customer service and attention to detail. Sarah, my deepest apologies for this situation, David called out as he rushed over. His face was flushed with embarrassment. I was already on my way to greet you personally since this is your first flight with us, but I never imagined. Miller's face drained of color as he watched his boss greeting Sarah with genuine respect and warmth. He started to stammer. Sir, I was just following protocol. Protocol? David's voice was sharp. Our protocol is to treat every member with respect and dignity. Miss Thompson isn't just a platinum member. She's our keynote speaker for next month's Luxury Aviation Summit in Dubai. The small crowd that had gathered began murmuring. Several phones were still recording, capturing every moment of the confrontation's resolution. Sarah noticed a few people shaking their heads in disgust at Miller's behavior. Michael Roberts, who had finally made his way outside, stepped forward. Sarah, I'm so sorry you had to experience this. We've flown together 3 times in the past year on commercial flights. She's one of the most respected tech CEOs in the country, he added, directing his words at Miller. Miller's aggressive demeanor had completely crumbled. He now looked small and uncertain, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I didn't know. That's exactly the problem. Sarah spoke up, her voice clear and measured. You didn't know, so you made assumptions. You didn't even bother to check my credentials properly. Instead, you threatened to call the police on a legitimate member because of what? What exactly made you so sure I didn't belong here? The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Everyone present knew exactly what had motivated Miller's behavior, but no one dared to say it aloud. David Chen turned to Miller, his expression stern. James, please report to HR immediately. Miss Peterson will be waiting for you. Then, addressing Sarah, he said, Please, let me personally escort you to our premium lounge. Your flight is being prepared as we speak. As Sarah walked through the terminal doors, finally granted the access she had rightfully owned all along, she could hear whispers and see phones being lowered. She knew that within hours, this incident would be all over social media. Her inbox would be flooded with messages from other executives, journalists, and probably even her competitors. But Sarah wasn't thinking about any of that yet. She was thinking about her mother, who had faced similar situations decades ago. She was thinking about her teenage daughter, who she hoped would live in a world where such incidents would be unthinkable. And she was thinking about all the other women who might not have had the platform or position to stand their ground as she had. As she settled into the luxurious lounge chair, David Chen personally bringing her a cup of her favorite coffee, information he had clearly noted from her membership preferences, Sarah opened her laptop. She had a message to craft, not just about this incident, but about the larger conversation it represented. This wasn't just about one security guard or one private aviation company. It was about systemic biases that still persisted in supposedly exclusive spaces. The next few hours would prove to be just the beginning of a much bigger story. While Sarah Thompson sat in the premium lounge preparing for her flight, a storm was brewing in Elite Private Aviation's corporate offices. Lisa Peterson, the head of human resources, sat across from James Miller in her office, reviewing the security footage from that morning's incident. The video played on her computer screen, showing multiple angles of Miller's confrontation with Sarah. James, would you like to explain what I'm seeing here? Lisa asked, her voice professional but filled with obvious disappointment. She had worked hard over the past year to improve the company's diversity training programs. Miller shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I was just trying to maintain security. We get a lot of unauthorized people trying to enter the terminal. Lisa paused the video. Really? Let's look at the past hour's footage. She clicked through several clips showing Miller's interactions with other arrivals. You didn't stop the 3 white men who entered. You didn't ask to see their credentials. You didn't threaten to call the police on the elderly white couple. Why was Ms. Thompson different? The security guard's face reddened, but he remained silent. Meanwhile, in another part of the building, David Chen was in an emergency video conference with the company's board of directors. The incident had already gone viral on social media. A passenger's video had been shared thousands of times, and hashtag Elite Aviation was trending on Twitter. This is a PR nightmare, said one board member, his face grave on the video screen. We're already getting calls from major news networks. It's more than just PR. Another board member, an older black woman named Patricia Williams, spoke up. This is a moment that requires real change, not just damage control. I've been saying for years that our security protocols need updating. Back in the premium lounge, Sarah was handling the situation with characteristic grace. She had just finished a phone call with her company's PR team, who wanted to release a statement. But Sarah had other ideas. She opened her laptop and began typing a LinkedIn post. This morning, I experienced something that many people of color face daily, the assumption that we don't belong in certain spaces. As a CEO and new member of Elite Private Aviation, I was denied entry and threatened with arrest despite having valid credentials. Her phone buzzed with a message from her daughter, Ashley. Mom, you're trending. Are you okay? Those videos look awful. Sarah smiled, typing back a reassuring response. She had raised Ashley to be strong and confident, and moments like these were teaching opportunities. In the HR office, Lisa Peterson was wrapping up her meeting with Miller. James, this isn't your first incident of discriminatory behavior. We've had 3 complaints in the past year, but none as public as this one. I'm afraid we have to terminate your employment, effective immediately. Miller stood up abruptly. You can't fire me. I've worked here for 5 years. I'll sue. You are hired to ensure security, not to discriminate against members, Lisa replied firmly. Your actions today violated multiple company policies, not to mention exposed us to potential legal action. Security will escort you out. As this was happening, Sarah's post had gone viral. Comments were pouring in from other executives sharing similar experiences. Several major clients of Elite Private Aviation were publicly demanding action. The incident was quickly becoming a catalyst for a larger conversation about discrimination in luxury services. David Chen knocked gently on the lounge door. Ms. Thompson, your aircraft is ready. But before you board, I wanted to share something with you. He handed her a tablet showing a draft of the company's new security protocols and anti-discrimination policies. We'd be honored if you consider joining our advisory board to help implement these changes. Sarah reviewed the document thoughtfully. The new policies included mandatory bias training, clear verification procedures that had to be applied equally to all members, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. As she walked toward her waiting jet, Sarah felt a mix of emotions. The morning had been challenging, but something positive was emerging from it. Her phone buzzed again, this time with messages from other black executives thanking her for speaking up. The pilot greeted her warmly as she boarded the luxurious aircraft. Welcome aboard, Ms. Thompson. We've been expecting you. Sarah settled into her seat, looking out the window at the morning sun. Sometimes, she thought, the worst moments led to the most important changes. Her flight to San Francisco would be about more than just meeting investors now. It would be about setting a new standard for inclusion in spaces that had long been exclusive. As Sarah's private jet soared over the country, her story was creating waves across the business world. In the first-class cabin, she opened her laptop to find her LinkedIn post had reached over 1 million views in just 3 hours. CEOs, celebrities, and influencers were all sharing their support and similar experiences. But what caught Sarah's attention most was an email from Janet Martinez, one of Elite Private Aviation's board members. The subject line read, "Your experience is changing everything." The email detailed how Sarah's incident had exposed a much bigger problem. Elite Private Aviation had discovered that James Miller wasn't just one bad employee, he was part of a troubling pattern. After the morning's events, Dozens of other members had come forward with their own stories of discrimination at various private aviation terminals across the country. Meanwhile, back at the terminal, things were moving quickly. David Chen had called an emergency staff meeting. The large conference room was packed with employees from every department: security, customer service, flight operations, and management. "What happened this morning was inexcusable," David began, his voice firm. "But it's also an opportunity for real change. Starting today, we're implementing new protocols." He clicked to the first slide of his presentation, which showed Sarah's photo alongside several other prestigious members who had faced similar discrimination. In the back of the room, Lisa Peterson was taking detailed notes. She had already scheduled interviews for 3 new security positions, specifically seeking candidates with experience in diversity and inclusion. The company's training manual was being completely rewritten. At that moment, Sarah's phone rang. It was Marcus Johnson, her company's head of PR. "Sarah, you won't believe this. The incident has gone beyond social media. Major news networks want to interview you. But here's the bigger news. 5 other private aviation companies have reached out. They want to work together on industry-wide standards for inclusive service." Sarah smiled, remembering her mother's words about dignity being armor. Now that armor was helping to break down walls for others, she thought about how to use this momentum for maximum impact. As her plane crossed over Colorado, Sarah began drafting a proposal. She wasn't just going to join Elite Private Aviation's advisory board. She was going to help create an industry-wide certification program for inclusive luxury services. Companies would need to meet strict standards of fair treatment and equal service to earn certification. Back at the terminal, more changes were already visible. The security desk had been redesigned to make the credential verification process more transparent and consistent. New signs clearly displayed member rights and the company's non-discrimination policy. Security cameras had been repositioned to better capture all interactions. David Chen's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Other aviation companies were calling, wanting to know how they could prevent similar incidents. Some were already dealing with their own stories of discrimination coming to light in the wake of Sarah's experience. In the HR office, Lisa Peterson was reviewing applications for a new position, Chief Diversity Officer. The role had been created and approved by the board within hours of the incident. The job posting had already received hundreds of applications. Sarah's daughter Ashley sent another text. "Mom, my friends are saying you're a hero. You're showing everyone how to stand up for themselves with class." Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes. This was the lesson she had always hoped to teach her daughter, that maintaining dignity in the face of discrimination could be a powerful force for change. As her plane began its descent into San Francisco, Sarah received one more significant email. It was from Patricia Williams, the Black woman on Elite's board. "Thank you for being the catalyst we needed. Sometimes it takes one person standing their ground to open the doors for everyone else. We're not just changing policies, we're changing minds." The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ms. Thompson, we're beginning our final approach to San Francisco. Thank you for flying with the Light Private Aviation today." Sarah looked out the window at the city coming into view below. What had started as an awful morning had transformed into something powerful. She opened her laptop one more time to finish her proposal for the industry-wide certification program. By the time she landed, she would have a complete plan for turning this moment into lasting change. The wheels touched down in San Francisco, but this was really just the beginning of a much longer journey, one that would reshape an entire industry's approach to equality and inclusion. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at a Light Private Aviation's terminal, and the ripple effects were becoming waves of change. Sarah Thompson sat in her San Francisco office, reviewing the latest developments on her tablet while preparing for a crucial video conference. The news headlines scrolled across her screen. Private aviation industry faces reckoning over discrimination. Elite Aviation leads change with new inclusion policies. CEO Sarah Thompson launches industry-wide reform initiative. But what really caught her attention was an email from James Miller, a former security guard. "Ms. Thompson," the email began, "I've spent the past 2 weeks thinking about my actions. I've realized how my biases affected not just you, but probably hundreds of other people over the years. I'm enrolling in bias training courses and working with a diversity consultant to educate myself. I know this doesn't excuse what I did, but I wanted you to know that you changed my perspective." Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing Miller's words. She hadn't expected this kind of reflection from him. Before she could respond, her assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Thompson, the video conference is ready. We have representatives from 12 private aviation companies waiting." The large screen in Sarah's office came to life, showing faces of CEOs and executives from across the industry. David Chen from Elite Aviation was there, along with Patricia Williams and leaders from competing companies. This was the first meeting of the newly formed Private Aviation Inclusion Council, PAFC. "Thank you all for joining today," Sarah began. "What happened to me was not an isolated incident. In the past 2 weeks, over 300 people have come forward with similar stories. Today, we're here to create real, lasting change." Meanwhile, back at Elite Aviation's terminal, the transformation was visible. The security desk had been completely redesigned. Instead of a single guard making decisions, there was now a team of 3 professionals working together. Every interaction was recorded, and verification procedures were standardized for all members. Lisa Peterson, now promoted to Chief Operating Officer, was conducting a training session with the new security team. "Remember," she explained, "our goal is to maintain security while ensuring every member feels welcomed and respected. We're setting the standard for the entire industry." In another part of the building, David Chen was reviewing the latest membership statistics. Since implementing the new inclusion policies, Elite Aviation had seen a 40% increase in diverse memberships. More importantly, member satisfaction scores had risen across all demographics. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Ashley. "Mom, guess what? My business class did a case study on your experience today. The professor used it as an example of how one person can create institutional change." The video conference continued as Sarah presented her proposal for the industry certification program. "We'll call it the Aviation Equality Certification," she explained. "Companies will need to meet strict standards in 5 areas: hiring practices, staff training, service protocols, complaint resolution, and ongoing monitoring." The executives listened intently as Sarah outlined the requirements. Some looked uncomfortable when she mentioned the costs involved, but none could deny the importance of the changes. Patricia Williams spoke up. "I've been in this industry for 30 years. This is the most significant change I've seen. We're not just fixing a problem, we're setting a new standard for luxury services everywhere." As the meeting progressed, commitments were made. 8 of the 12 companies agreed to implement the certification program immediately. The others promised to join within 6 months. Back in San Francisco, Sarah's team was already working on the next phase. They were developing an app that would allow members to rate their experiences and report concerns in real time. Transparency would be key to maintaining the new standards. The afternoon sun was setting when Sarah finally finished the video conference. She opened her laptop to respond to James Miller's email. After careful thought, she wrote, "Mr. Miller, thank you for your honesty. While your actions that day were harmful, your willingness to learn and change is important. Sometimes our worst moments can lead to our greatest growth. I hope you'll use this experience to help others recognize and overcome their biases." As she sent the email, Sarah received a notification. Elite Aviation had just announced its first diverse majority board of directors, with Patricia Williams as the new chairperson. The changes were happening faster than anyone had expected. Sarah smiled, thinking about how a single morning had sparked such widespread transformation, but she knew this was just the beginning. Real change would require ongoing commitment and vigilance. The aviation industry was just the first step. Other luxury service sectors were already reaching out to learn from their example. 1 month after the incident, Sarah Thompson stood at a podium in Dubai's most prestigious hotel ballroom. The Luxury Aviation Summit, originally planned as a standard industry conference, had transformed into something much more significant. Over 500 industry leaders from around the world filled the room, their attention focused on the woman who had changed their industry. "When I was denied entry to that terminal a month ago," Sarah began, "I had 2 choices. I could let it go, or I could use that moment to create change. Today, I'm proud to announce that choice has led to something extraordinary." The large screen behind her displayed the new Aviation Equality Certification logo, a sleek design combining wings with an equal sign. Below it were the names of 23 private aviation companies that had already earned certification. In the audience, David Chen sat next to Patricia Williams, both wearing proud smiles. Elite Aviation had become the gold standard for inclusive luxury services, and their business was thriving. Their membership had grown by 60% since implementing the new policies, with diversity in their client base increasing significantly. Sarah continued her speech, but today, I want to share something unexpected. Remember James Miller, the security guard who blocked my entry? A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone knew his name. Last week, he contacted me again. He's now working with a diversity consulting firm, sharing his story to help other companies recognize and address their biases. The audience was silent, absorbing this surprising development. Sarah clicked to the next slide, showing statistics from the past month. 342 incidents of discrimination reported across our industry in the past year. Since implementing our new standards, that number has dropped to 0 at certified companies. This isn't just about numbers, it's about changing lives and changing minds. Meanwhile, back in the United States, Lisa Peterson was conducting the first graduation ceremony for Elite Aviation's new security training program. 30 security officers from various aviation companies had completed the intensive 4-week course on inclusive security practices. "You are the front line of our new approach," Lisa told the graduates. "Your actions will show every member that they belong here, regardless of their appearance, background, or cultural identity." In the hotel ballroom, Sarah was reaching the most important part of her presentation. "Today, I'm excited to announce the launch of the Inclusive Luxury Alliance. This organization will extend our certification program beyond aviation to all luxury services, hotels, car services, exclusive clubs, and more." The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause. Representatives from major luxury brands were already lining up to join the initiative. Sarah's vision had grown far beyond that morning at the terminal. She clicked to a new slide showing Ashley, her daughter, speaking to a high school business class. "This is why we do this work," Sarah explained. "The next generation needs to see that change is possible, that standing up with dignity can transform entire industries." The crowd rose in a standing ovation as Sarah concluded her speech, but she wasn't finished yet. In the back of the ballroom, doors opened to reveal a special exhibition. Photos and stories of people who had faced discrimination in luxury spaces, paired with testimonials about positive changes they'd experienced under the new certification program. David Chen approached Sarah after the presentation. "We've received inquiries from luxury companies in 32 countries," he said excitedly. "They'd all want to be part of this movement." Patricia Williams added, "And our member satisfaction scores are the highest they've ever been, across all demographics. It turns out treating everyone with respect is good for business." Sarah checked her phone to find a message from her mother. "Baby, I just watched your speech online. Your father would have been so proud. You didn't just open doors, you built new ones." As the conference attendees moved through the exhibition, Sarah noticed something remarkable. People weren't just looking at the photos and reading the stories. They were sharing their own experiences, having honest conversations about privilege, bias, and change. A young hotel executive approached her with tears in her eyes. "Miss Thompson, I've been afraid to speak up about similar experiences in my industry, but seeing what you've accomplished gives me courage. Can you help us implement these changes in the hotel sector?" Sarah smiled warmly. "That's exactly why we're here. Change doesn't stop at one industry or one incident. It grows when we all stand together." As the Dubai sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, Sarah looked out at the city from the hotel's terrace. What had started as one woman's stand against discrimination had become a global movement for inclusive luxury. And this was still just the beginning. 6 months after the Dubai conference, Sarah Thompson sat in her office reviewing the latest Inclusive Luxury Alliance report. The numbers were remarkable. Over 200 luxury companies had earned certification, discrimination complaints had dropped by 95% across certified businesses, and member satisfaction rates were at record highs. But what made her smile most was the front page of Forbes magazine on her desk. The headline read, "From Discrimination to Revolution: How Sarah Thompson's Airport Experience Changed Luxury Services Forever." Inside was a feature story showcasing dozens of success stories from the initiative. Her intercom buzzed. Miss Thompson, you have a special visitor in the lobby. Sarah was surprised to see James Miller, the former security guard, waiting nervously in the reception area. He looked different now, more humble, more thoughtful. He was wearing a suit and carrying a presentation folder. Miss Thompson, he began, thank you for seeing me. I've been traveling around the country for the past 3 months, speaking at companies about my experience, about how wrong I was and what I learned. Today, I'm here because I have something to show you. He opened his folder to reveal a training program he had developed. Recognition and Recovery. From Bias to Better. It was a course designed to help people who, like him, had acted on their biases and wanted to change. Meanwhile, at a light private aviation's terminal, the transformation was complete. The security desk was now staffed by a diverse team led by Maria Rodriguez, a former military officer with extensive training in inclusive security practices. Every member who entered was treated with the same respect and professionalism. Lisa Peterson, now the company's president of operations, was showing a news crew around the facility. What happened here 6 months ago sparked a revolution, she explained. But the real success isn't just in our new policies, it's in the change of mindset throughout the industry. Sarah's phone lit up with a text from Ashley. Mom, my business school professor just announced that our case study about you is being published. They're calling it the Thompson Effect. How one incident revolutionized an industry. Back in her office, Sarah listened as James Miller presented his program. She was struck by his sincerity and the depth of his transformation. I've spoken to over 5,000 people, he said. Every time I tell my story, someone in the audience realizes they've been that person too, the one making assumptions, the one causing harm without even realizing it. Sarah's assistant interrupted with urgent news. The White House had called. They wanted Sarah to speak at a special summit on corporate diversity and inclusion. Her story would be used as a model for creating lasting institutional change. That afternoon, Sarah had a video call with Patricia Williams and the board of the Inclusive Luxury Alliance. They were reviewing applications from new sectors, exclusive restaurants, high-end retail chains, and luxury real estate companies all wanted to join the certification program. We're seeing a domino effect, Patricia explained. Companies that aren't certified are losing business to those that are. Being inclusive isn't just right, it's becoming essential for survival in the luxury market. Sarah opened her email to find a message from a young black entrepreneur. Your story gave me courage. Today, I walked into a luxury car dealership that had your certification logo in the window. For the first time in my life, I was treated like I belonged there. I bought my dream car, and I cried in the parking lot afterward. Not from sadness, but from hope. As the day drew to a close, Sarah worked on her White House speech. She thought about how far things had come from that morning at the terminal. The Inclusive Luxury Alliance was now working with universities to develop curriculum for business schools. Major corporations were redesigning their training programs based on their certification standards. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from David Chen. Sarah, we just got the quarterly numbers. Elite Aviation's revenue is up 85% since implementing the new standards. Other certified companies are seeing similar results. You were right. Inclusion isn't just good for people, it's good for business. Sarah walked to her office window, watching the sunset over the city. On her desk lay an invitation to next month's Global Luxury Summit in Paris, where she would be the keynote speaker. The theme of the summit was "The Future is Inclusive." She thought about her mother's words about dignity being armor. That armor had not only protected her, it had helped build a shield for countless others. And the revolution was still growing. 1 year to the day after the incident, Sarah Thompson stood once again at the entrance to a light private aviation's terminal. But this time, everything was different. A large crowd had gathered for the unveiling of something special, a commemorative plaque that would serve as both a reminder and a promise. The terminal itself had been completely redesigned. The security desk was now a welcoming circle, staffed by a diverse team trained in both security and hospitality. Above the entrance, alongside the company logo, was the golden seal of the Inclusive Luxury Alliance. Maria Rodriguez, the head of security, stepped forward to greet Sarah. Welcome back, Ms. Thompson. A lot has changed since that morning, hasn't it? Indeed, it had. The Inclusive Luxury Alliance now had over 500 certified companies across 12 countries. The Thompson effect was being taught in business schools worldwide, and Sarah's story had become a Harvard Business School case study. David Chen, now the global president of Inclusive Excellence at Elite Aviation, addressed the gathered crowd. 1 year ago, a terrible incident happened here. Today, we're not just remembering that moment, we're celebrating how it transformed our industry. The crowd included familiar faces: Patricia Williams, Lisa Peterson, and even James Miller, who had become one of the country's most sought-after speakers on corporate transformation. His training program had been implemented in over 1,000 companies. Sarah's daughter Ashley stood proudly beside her mother. Now a business school student herself, she was interning with the Inclusive Luxury Alliance, helping to develop programs for the next generation of corporate leaders. The plaque was simple but powerful. It read, "On this spot, discrimination met dignity and transformation began. Dedicated to all those who stand up for change with grace and courage." Below these words was a QR code that linked to resources about inclusive business practices. As Sarah stepped up to the podium, she saw faces in the crowd from all walks of life: executives, employees, members, and even some of the people who had shared similar stories after her incident went viral. 1 year ago, she began, I stood here and faced a choice. Today, we all stand here having made a choice to transform a moment of discrimination into a movement for change. She paused, looking at the diverse crowd before her. But our work isn't finished. This plaque isn't just about remembering, it's about committing to continue this journey. The latest statistics flashed on screens around the terminal. Certified companies had seen an average 70% increase in diverse clientele. Customer satisfaction scores were at historic highs. Employee retention had improved by 45%. The business case for inclusion was undeniable. After the ceremony, Sarah walked through the terminal with Ashley. They passed the new training center where security staff from around the world came to learn inclusive practices. In the member lounge, the walls displayed artwork from diverse artists, and the magazines represented a wide range of cultures and experiences. "Mom," Ashley said, "remember when you used to tell me that dignity was armor? Now it's become a foundation for change." Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Baby, your father is smiling down from heaven today. You didn't just open doors, you built bridges." As they reached the private jet area, Sarah saw something that brought tears to her eyes. A young black girl, about 7 years old, was watching the planes with her parents. She wore a toy pilot's cap and carried a model airplane. When she saw Sarah, her eyes widened with recognition. "Mommy, that's the lady from my school book," the girl exclaimed. "She made it so everyone can fly." Sarah knelt down to talk with the young girl, remembering her own childhood dreams. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" she asked. "I want to be a pilot and own my own airline," the girl declared proudly. "And nobody can tell me I don't belong." As Sarah boarded her flight that afternoon, she thought about that little girl. The changes of the past year hadn't just transformed businesses, they had transformed possibilities for future generations. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Thompson. Thank you for everything you've done for our industry." Looking out the window as the plane took off, Sarah could see the terminal growing smaller below. The plaque would remain there, telling its story to all who passed by, but the real story wasn't in the bronze and letters. It was in the changed hearts and minds, in the new policies and practices, and in the dreams of a little girl who now knew she could fly as high as she wanted. The end wasn't really an end at all. It was just the beginning of a new chapter in the ongoing journey toward true inclusion.